Hi, I'm Danny,
Hi, I'm Mel.
and we're the Sheehan sisters. If you haven't seen our faces before, we like to do podcast and commentary style videos on different topics we like to talk about.
Yes, so as always, grab your coffee, water, your beverage of choice, grab some snacks, get cozy because we have a lot to talk about today. I'm drinking out of a Smirnoff cup, but there is coffee in here.
I am drinking out of Dad's Saratoga mug in honor of him because today we are doing our book review for the month of May, as you can see in the title. If you aren't familiar with our book club, keep up with our community posts because we do announce the upcoming books and we give you updates there because sometimes our timeline is just off and we get our book review out later than we want to, but we're trying our best nevertheless.
So we're filming this on June 2nd. Okay, so it's only been 2 days after the we finished reading. Okay, we give ourselves the full month to read the book.
And we give you all the full month, so join us, please. We'd love to share our opinions with you all on the book of the month, which was Catcher in the Rye for May. If you haven't watched our book of the month for April, we did Crying in H Mart, where we talk about our father. And we wanted to honor his birthday month, the month of May, with his favorite book, which is Catcher in the Rye. And I was actually thinking about this after I finished it, and I'm like, I wonder why it was Dad's favorite.
Yeah, we did not get to have that conversation. Although I have a lot to say about the book, as this is what the video will be. So it's probably good that I have a lot to say.
We love when Mel's prepared. I hate when she comes on and says, I don't know what to say. I'm like, girl, this is a podcast. You have to say something.
I don't like to talk. I'm not a talkative person, but everything in my birth chart says that this is what is going to get me money and fame and success is my voice. And then I'm ruled by Mercury in my sun and my rising, and I should be a talkative person. Anyway, we're going on a tangent.
Tangents. Okay, so I kind of think I know why Dad liked this, right? Do you know who Holden Caulfield was reminding me of a little bit?
I have a few people. Ferris Bueller.
Ferris Bueller. Okay, I like that. No, he reminds me of George Carlin. George Carlin. I for some reason when I hear
Two different people, I said, but you know what? We're still on the comedy.
who was your second person?
No, I didn't have a sec. He reminded me of a few people, and just a lot of movies were coming to mind, and Dead Poet Society kept coming to mind while I was reading this.
Well, I just feel like some of his rants are similar to George Carlin's ranch.
Well, he did want to go to the ranch, yes. Is that where we wanted? Is this why we wanted to move to Colorado? Is this why Colorado was calling us?
I was gonna bring that up too. Mel and I have been saying for years that we should live in Colorado. And this man, well, he's not a man, this young boy at the end of the book says he wants to move and run away to Colorado. And I'm like, hello, we're gonna keep getting the signs.
Seattle is also mentioned in this book,
It is.
which those are major, like, those are popular places to live. So, but we're gonna always take it as a sign. Anyway, we're saying a lot and nothing at the same time. I feel.
Well, he is. I don't know if Holden Caulfield is supposed to be born and raised in New York, but he does live in New York City. And I was thinking, this is what I was thinking reading this book, because they have yet to do a movie for Catcher in the Rye. And I made a little joke that in 10 years we would do the movie for Handmaid's Tale. And I'm throwing that out the window, and I think our calling is to make Catcher in the Rye the movie.
Okay.
Because I started getting ideas of how I could set this up. And I'm like, maybe when we have the resources and the platform, we can like network and get people to help us bring this to life.
I do have some negative things I'm gonna say about the book, so I don't know if that's gonna help us with that endeavor or not.
Listen, I think book reviews should have equal parts positive feedback, equal parts constructive criticism. Not necessarily negative.
Constructive criticism, yes. I'm gonna give an overview right now.
Yes, give us your overview.
I didn't remember much about this book. I read it in high school as it was given to me by the teacher to read and study and get tested on. And all I could remember about the book is Holden Caulfield hating the whole world and this being considered like a really great coming of age novel. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna reread it. I'm gonna see what is so amazing about this book, right? This is considered one of the classics. And I can definitely see for the time that it was published why it was such an important book. It's like, wow, a man has expressed his emotions. That is shocking for the time. But I also think after having read so much from, I read this when I was 14 to now being 32, like how much I've read in between, and just coming off of reading the past 3 books we read were by women authors, seeing the stark difference between those books and this one, which there's nothing similar about any of those books to this, but so it's probably not a fair comparison, but just like reading women authors and their trauma to then reading this book about this spoiled teenage boy who's just an angsty teenager is really interesting to see. We did also read The Bell Jar last year. We never did a video on it or anything. It was reminding me a little bit of that book as well.
That's fair. Do you remember when The Bell Jar was published? Because I just looked it up and Catcher in the Rye was published in 1951. So I feel like The Bell Jar was 40s, 50s as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's 50s as well.
Which we know wasn't known for its mental health research, right? And I say that because I do no credentials whatsoever when I say this, but I think that Holden Caulfield has some diagnoses.
Right, and as we see towards the end of the book, he's hopefully getting the help he needs for whatever it may be that is causing him trouble. Obviously, he mentions being suicidal throughout the book, so he's definitely battling with depression.
I think he may have bipolar disorder. I think he may be ADHD. I know that he was having some manic episodes. And listen, I can relate. I related.
There's definitely relatable content in here. Being mad at the world, being an angsty teenager. We've been there in our lives. I have a controversial question to ask you, though.
Oh, God.
Do you think if Holden Caulfield existed in this year of 2026, would he be one of the red pill alpha male? Would he be following that content, and would he be supporting that type of content?
I don't think so, because my interpretation of him is that yes, let's put him in. This is gonna. I'm veering off somewhere else, but let's throw him into the Gossip Girl universe for a second, right?
Love that. He's lonely boy.
Well, granted, Dan Humphrey wasn't as wealthy. I mean, considering he was middle class. This is all I know. This doesn't make any sense to some people, but this is how our brains work. But I was just picturing him in like a more modern, high society class, right? And I feel like he, yes, he does have that privilege, he does have that wealth, but he's also disgusted by it.
Yes.
Like, I related to him being like, okay, I see through people, like humans suck, like all of these interactions make me want to puke, like I totally understand that. And that's why I thought about George Carlin, because most of his stand up is just ripping humanity to shreds and how ridiculous humans are. And I just feel like Holden grew up in a very privileged world, yes. And, there are parts where he mentions his privilege and his wealth and he sees the disparity, which is why I think he wants to be more anti, what's the word I'm looking for? He wants to rebel against that stereotype, but that could also just be him navigating his trauma because, as we learn, he lost his brother. I'm sure if we got more of his background story, we know that just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you can't have trauma in your life. And there could be parental neglect, right? My overview was he is a wealthy, privileged teenager, but he also observes that world he grew up in. And I think there's two sides to it. Like, I think he does inherit some of the traits of the world he grew up in, but that's all the more he wants to rebel against it or call out, as he likes to say over and over again, phonies. And we even see that with his disdain for Hollywood and for acting. But there's also a part of him that is also a creative. I think he potentially would want to be part of that world, but he doesn't want to be. I feel like there's a part of him that would want to be a part of that world, but he also sees the fakeness that's required in order to be of high society or be in Hollywood.
Right. And there are parts of the book where I'm like, I understand, hating small talk and having to do certain pleasantries with people, even though you feel like they're being fake. But then there were other parts of the book where I felt like he had no basis for hating some people or things, and he was being a little arrogant and rude. And I feel like we're spending half this book and it's just like he's lonely and horny and he's trying to get laid and he's being disrespectful to women, or like talking about certain women disrespectfully.
Right, but I think there's also that dichotomy within him too, where he knows he should be respectful, but then there is that young teenage boy hormones where, yeah, that is all he thinks about. But then when it comes to it, like for example, we see he orders a prostitute and then ultimately doesn't want to engage in anything sexual. So I think throughout the book we see him battling between wanting to maintain that innocence. I think he sees certain behaviors as inappropriate.
Right. I feel like he's conflicted on a lot. And then you remember, oh, I'm essentially kind of reading the diary of a teenage boy and like what's going through his mind. And obviously, he doesn't have a strong hold on life. He hasn't yet to experience much. And yeah, he's still dealing with the trauma of losing his brother, which affected him more than I think he realizes. And like he'll like briefly bring it up and mention it here and there, but I don't think he's actually taking the time to be like, oh, this really affected me.
Right, he's just pushing it away, which is why I think there were parts of him that I could relate to, because he very much wants to escape, like escape his own mind, escape his own feelings, escape his own trauma, escape his upbringing, because he doesn't want to actually face it. And going back to wanting to retain that innocence, I think that's also why he appreciates his little sister Phoebe so much, right? Because she exemplifies traits that he adores, and he still sees the purity within her, and looks at people who are getting older, and views the world of adults as tainted, and feels like once you get older, or once you, not once you get older, but like once you have to interact in society in a certain way, he feels like there's a phoniness to it, which is why I think he's refusing to finish school and like find a purpose in his life, or even strive for a career, because be he doesn't want to participate in society, because he feels like so much of society is fake.
Right. But I also think, like, again, reading it now from an adult perspective, I'm like, okay, dude, you're 17. Like, you're not being taken seriously by a lot of people because they know you're young, and he's getting frustrated through with that throughout the book, where he's getting frustrated that people won't serve him alcohol, or like he feels like the women aren't taking him seriously, or like he'll have conversations with people and he's like, oh, they don't want to get deep with me. But I think a lot of them would just see him as like an annoying, immature boy, and we're kind of just reading it from his lens, where he's like, all these people are fake and phony, where they're probably like, here's this obnoxious, again, that's why I brought up Ferris Bueller, which I know some people are like, what do you mean? But it's like, oh, here's this. I think Ferris Bueller is like him, but with more confidence, where it's like, oh, here comes this obnoxious kid again. Like, there's one part in the book where he's having a conversation with someone, and they're like, is this going to be one of those Caulfield conversations? Like, they already know.
Well, that's why I feel like he has this complex of like, oh, I'm such a deep person and nobody understands me, and everybody's shallow and superficial, and they just don't get it the way I get it.
Yes, that was very much what I was getting throughout the book. And there's some parts where, like I said, like I want to relate and understand him, but then he'll do things where I'm just like, well, now I'm annoyed with you too.
Oh, 100%. He's annoying. He's a liar. We can't trust his narrative.
Unreliable narrative. That is something I wrote down.
Yes. Do I also think this is a self-insert by J.D. Salinger? Potentially. We do want to watch his documentary, so stay tuned for that.
Well, I was marking off things for us to talk about and writing down notes. I was trying to remember what we talked about in school. I'm like sitting here reading this book and trying to think of like, what was the teacher being like, okay, and today's class, we're going to discuss this part. Like, we're sitting around talking about this guy, again, who's just like this teenager. And I feel like most of what he's going through is kind of normal. Obviously, he has more money and privilege, but for the most part, it's like, what in this book, and maybe we'll get into that when we start to discuss things, because there's definitely things I'm looking at where I'm like, oh, we need to talk about this and that, but I don't understand like what we were spending 30 minutes of class for like a month talking about.
Listen, an English teacher will be able to dissect paragraph to paragraph, okay, chapter to chapter. They will draw that out.
But I say that to say, like, in one of our previous episodes, I was like, oh, they don't teach this in school anymore. But honestly, I don't think it's needed to be taught. I think it should still be available for children, not children, like teenagers. I think it should still be available for them to read and be in the library. But I'm just like, do we need to study this as closely as we were? That's just my opinion.
Right. Do I think that we've read more in-depth and meaningful books over the past 6 months? Yes. I was also thinking, would this book be as successful if it was written today? Probably not, like you had mentioned earlier. Listen, if I wrote in the same way that J.D. Salinger, if I wrote in the same way that J.D. Salinger wrote Holden Caulfield, I wouldn't get published, most likely. Um, it is a lot more repetitive than I remember, but then I am trying to look at it from the lens of like, this is his thoughts, right? And this is, he's trying to write in the way that Holden's mind works, which is why I'm like, this young man has some diagnosis because he's unwell. But I relate to that, you know? And of course, his favorite subject is English, and it's the only subject he passes in school. And he does have a love for literature.
Oh, well, we're going to get into that because I marked a few pages and I'm annoyed at his thoughts on certain books that he mentioned.
Right. Do I think he's a pessimist? Yes. Do I understand it being an adult and acknowledging how self-centered people are and people's individualistic mindset, like we've mentioned countless times in other episodes? I completely understand his disdain for human interactions.
Right, but then that's also him being egotistical, where he's thinking, oh, well, I'm better than this conversation anyway, or I'm better than this kid.
Right.
So again, and we mentioned this before, like people are hypocrites, and he contradicts himself constantly throughout the book, and he criticizes, he projects a lot too. He criticizes a lot that he does himself. Like he'll be annoyed that someone's doing something and then he's also doing it. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's look in the mirror for a second. Going off of what you said earlier of like us doing the movie, I think we could do this movie and I think it'd be so interesting if we did it. Because again, this is supposed to be him calling back to his life and telling a story. So if we did it with him sitting across from a therapist or a psychiatrist telling the story, and like people who read the book might get annoyed because we talked about that too and you change certain aspects, but I think having just like it, like keeping the story that he's telling the same, because we don't find that until the end that he's in some kind of not rehabilitation, but like some kind of therapy.
See, I wasn't really gathering that.
Well, he says it's hard, it's very, I had to reread it.
The last page when he says, especially this one psychoanalyst guy they have here keeps asking me if I'm going to apply myself when I go back to school next September.
Yeah, it's very vaguely added.
See, but you're getting the vision of how we could do the movie, right? And I was trying to think of a modern actor I would cast as Holden.
Timothy Chalamet. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, I had the same thought, but I would have casted him like early Timothy Chalamet.
Early Timothy Chalamet is, but is it that literal? Isn't he kind of, because he's from, Timothy Chalamet is from New York. He comes from a privileged background. He thinks he's great. Like, is he the modern day Holden Caulfield? We're gonna get a lot of backlash. But that's the thing. Okay, I wanted to say too, I don't think this will live on to be a classic. Okay, don't shoot me. Don't come for me. I don't think it's going to hold up another 50, 100 years.
Interesting. I mean, I think it already is. I don't want to say disappearing, but yeah, it's not part of the curriculum anymore. So there's a good chance that it won't be as well known.
Right. But I'm glad we are talking about it. Again, going off of the other books we've read and seeing how important those books are even more now, because a lot of those books, the authors were women, and they said that they wanted their voices to be heard and their stories to be told. And
Sorry, I I also had Mason Thames. I also had Mason Thames in mind to cast as Holden Caulfield. He's in a multitude of movies. I know people love him. But yeah, sorry. Sidetrack. See, like we have some sort of mental illness as well because we can't.
everyone in the I think we all
Like if she does this joke today.
I will do this joke until the day I die.
Oh my god. And then you're in your deathbed and you're like, I think we're all gonna die.
We all see the light. They're gonna pull the plug on me for sure.
I'm crying.
No, so I'm gonna say something important after we're just joking around, but that's kind of how things go. But again, I see the importance more of other books after reading this, because again, here's this white guy who's like, let my story be told. And then we hear from authors like Toni Morrison and Margaret Atwood and even Michelle Zauner, who are like, actually, my story needs to be told. Like, we're not hearing stories of little black girls. We're not hearing stories of Korean women. We're not hearing stories about what if women were oppressed, right? And like, you see the importance of those books even more when you rereading these so-called classics, and you're like, okay, like what is so important about this? But even again, I compare it to The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is also considered a classic, and you're reading that too, where again, it's that one's very similar to The Catcher in the Rye, where it's like, here's this young girl who doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, and then you go to Holden Caulfield, where he's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, which is a very normal feeling to have. And I understand in the 50s, when both of these books were published, it wasn't.
I was going to say, granted, Esther, the protagonist of The Bell Jar, does get a lobotomy, and I think it does talk to how they treated women's mental health in the 50s and not until modern times. So
Right.
Do I want to compare it to like Holden Caulfield just being an angsty, rich teenage boy? Not necessarily, because I do think there's more we can take from The Bell Jar than we could from The Catcher in the Rye. But I do see the similarities that you're saying.
Yes, no, I definitely, again, having it be written by a woman about a woman is obviously going to be a completely different experience. But I was just saying, if I could take a book that was written by a woman to compare it to this, it would be The Bell Jar.
No, I agree. And they both address mental health issues.
You see how, like, if any of you have read The Bell Jar, like, it's taken, not even that it's taken more seriously because she's a woman, but it's also kind of taken out of, like, blown out of proportion in a sense, too.
Right.
Where it's like, oh my God, she doesn't want to get married or go to college. Like, we have to put her in the psychiatric ward. Yeah, anyway, I'm rambling a lot. Let's get into...
Well, I also, before we get into, I do want to point out, from good old Spark Notes, do you remember Spark Notes?
Of course, yeah.
Their themes that they listed, if this helps us, which is what I was already discovering as I'm reading this. Alienation as a form of self-protection.
Relatable.
100%. The painfulness of growing up. The phoniness of the adult world. Can you imagine, though, you like plopped Holden Caulfield into 2026 and how much he would despise social media and influencers?
That's what I'm saying. I feel like, going off of the question I asked you earlier, I feel like while I was reading this, he would have gone down a bad path. Like, I think he would have found the wrong video, and I think we would have lost Holden to the dark side. Because especially in the parts where he's calling those women ugly, he's like, and the ugly ones, and I was like, oh, okay, well. And then he very much gives me like, but I'm a nice guy attitude from him a lot. And I was getting very annoyed where I was like, okay, these women are clearly don't want anything to do with you. You're calling up women in the middle of the night. Let's not do that. That's how, again, I was thinking back, like, what would we have talked about in school? And I would hope that the teacher would stop and be like, okay, young man, and what he's doing here on this page, let's not do. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's not call up women in the middle of the night because we want to get laid. And again, I understand, like, he's still a virgin and he doesn't end up doing anything with the prostitute, probably because he's too nervous and scared. And which shows up a lot in the book too, where he's too scared to do a lot of things and act on a lot of things, and he kind of lives in this, well, what I would have done. He says that a lot too. He's like, well, what I would have done, and he goes into these imaginary scenarios, yes, of what he wished he would have done.
That's another theme that's listed here, is inaction. They also talk about appearances, religion, performance.
Yeah, I wrote down religion too. Every book we've read so far has had religion mentioned, which I think is something I wanted to talk about. But I just want to finish my thought really quickly. And I'm sorry, I'm shitting on Holden Caulfield. But again, I just got very annoyed with the way he spoke about women in a lot of different parts and like calling them stupid. And again, knowing that women back at that time definitely didn't have as much rights and access as they do now. If he got dropped in 2026, he might have to put him in a psychiatric ward, because I don't think he'd be able to handle it.
Right. At the end of the day, he still has his male privilege, and we do see that mentality of how he views women. It's interesting though, because I feel like I mentioned earlier, he does have that dichotomy where he absolutely loves women, right? And but in the same breath, only if he finds them attractive. Because we see how he speaks of Jane Gallagher, right? His crush since he was a child.
Right, again, romanticizing this one summer he had with her.
I'm crying.
Never letting it go, and he's gonna forever until the end of his life talk about Jane Gallagher. And I think we've mentioned that in another episode before, where a guy will have this like long lost love that they'll hold on to.
Right, but do you think he also had a connection with her where he saw more of her emotional depth and maybe even her trauma as well, because he alludes to something going on with her stepfather? I do think he wants the complex of like you said, I'm the nice guy and like I could save her. Or even his overall theme of like, I could save the children.
I think, right, and that's what I'm saying, like, reading this and, you know, knowing that you're just, like, in the mind of a man, and there's all these things he wishes he could do and wants to do, but ultimately he's holding himself back, and we never really fully understand the reasoning why. Like, we have maybe the trauma of him losing his brother, but other than that, we're kind of still trying to figure it out. And even...
Well, that's why I feel like... Sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You can say.
Well, that's why I feel like there's a part of him that wants to be part of certain worlds, but because he has his own fears and his own limitations, that he ends up critiquing that world, right? That he possibly wishes he was part of. Like, for example, he hates the movies, he hates Hollywood, he hates Broadway shows, but then you see him have moments where he starts acting out a scene in his head, or like playing around with like his roommate Stradlater, where he's like pretending he's in a movie and like acting out a scene. And then we see him do that again later on when he's at the bar, where he's like, I'm pretending I got shot and like I need to call old Jane Gallagher up. And and he's holding his quote unquote wound. So I feel like there's a part of him that has that creative side and maybe even wishes he was an actor or can be a part of that industry. Sorry, we had to stop and restart. I'm going to finish my point from before, where I feel like Holden has a creative side to him where there may be a part of him that wants to be an actor or is a creative, right? We see how much he loves reading and writing. But there's a part of him that is fearful to pursue his interest or his talent to the point where I feel like he may want to discredit that industry or be negative towards it or pick it apart or criticize it in order to make himself feel better. Because we even see how he views his brother DB, who lives in Hollywood now and is a writer. So maybe there's a jealousy within him that also is drawn to that, but because he doesn't have that motivation or that drive to pursue it, or even the focus really, that he decides to view it in a more negative lens to make himself feel better. You know, we see that even in our modern world, right? Like perhaps people are just projecting, like we mentioned earlier, their negative views because there's a part of them that is envious of what someone else is doing and they wish they could be doing it, but because they don't have the drive to or they don't have the fearlessness to pursue it, they rather just shit on it to make themselves feel better. What do you think?
No, and I agree with what you're saying, and that's definitely something that Holden does throughout the book. And I will cut him some slack because he is a teenager and he's just trying to figure out the world. And you mentioned the theme of escapism, and he's definitely doing that throughout this book, where he's constantly drinking at a young age. And he's constantly trying to just like find someone to spend time with and talk to, and maybe even search for like meaning of life or substance to life. And he's constantly like calling people and asking people to go have a drink with him, or even asking like the cab drivers to come have a drink with him, like constantly just trying to find anyone to give him time and attention. Or like, I think he's searching for something, but I don't even think he fully knows what it is he's searching for.
Right, and we do see the irony in his disdain for human interactions, but like you mentioned, he still craves it. We'll see time and time again with the people he does meet up with. He lets us know when he's being genuine, and he'll be like, oh yeah, I meant it. When he, like, for example, when he meets up with Sally Hayes, he's like, yeah, good to see you too. And he's like, and I actually meant it. And even when he meets up with Luce, I think that's how you say it, right? Luce or Luce.
Right, I was saying loose, but maybe, yeah, it's possible.
So that was the young man that was saying, oh, I hope this is not another Caulfield conversation.
Yeah.
So there's parts of him that does crave that human interaction and that connection, but then when he feels like he's not getting, it's not being reciprocated in the way he wants it to be, he starts picking apart the whole interaction or picking apart the entire person he's hanging out with. Where when he's with Sally Hayes, he has such a good time, and then he starts to get under her skin, right? Let me go to that page.
Again, and he does that quite often, where like I was saying before, that he was starting to annoy me because he'll just start to like play around and goof around, which again, he's a teenage boy, so you're like, okay, this makes sense. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but this is why no one is taking you seriously.
And as you all know by now, if you watch our book reviews, we like to jump around. So it's not going to be in chronological order of the book. So we see him buy tickets to the Lunce's show. And he even shits on that, but he was like, oh, this is going to impress Sally, so I'll just buy it for her. And then they finally meet up. And then this is on page 138 to 139, where she says, Holden, it's marvelous to see you. It's been ages. And then he skips down, and then I'll skip down a couple lines, and he says, swell to see you. I said, I meant it too. How are you anyway? Absolutely marvelous. Am I late? And then on the next page, he tells her to hurry up. They're going to miss the show. And then they end up kissing in the car, and he tells her he loves her. He goes, just to show you how crazy I am, when we were coming out of this big clinch, I told her I loved her and all. It was a lie, of course, but the thing is, I meant it when I said it. I'm crazy. I swear to God I am. So he does have his toxic side to him. You know, how you were mentioning him potentially being one of those modern men that end up hating women. I just think that once the bubble bursts for him when he's with somebody, like if they don't react the way he wants them to, that's when he'll either turn on them, or in his mind, like he starts to criticize the interaction. And then to go off of his interaction with Sally, we go to page I'm pulling up, we'll go to the end of page 140. Oh, actually, you know what? I wanted to read this part where he talks about the actors.
Okay, I don't think our pages are the same.
Oh, really? This is when they're about to finish act 1 of the show. So him and Sally went to go see a show, and then he's commenting on the actors. Hi, Nala. Okay, so he says, Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine were the old couple, and they were very good, but I didn't like them much. They were different, though, I'll say that. They didn't act like people, and they didn't act like actors. It's hard to explain. They acted more like they knew they were celebrities and all. I mean, they were good, but they were too good. When one of them got finished making a speech, the other one said something very fast right after it. It was supposed to be like people really talking and interrupting each other and all. The trouble was, it was too much like people talking and interrupting each other. But anyway, they were the only ones on the show, the Lunts I mean, that looked like they had any real brains. I have to admit it. I just felt like this was a good example of him never being pleased. Right? Where he's like, oh yeah, they're good actors, but they must know they're good actors, so that's phony to me. And we see him constantly do this with anybody he interacts with, really. I mean, there's only a handful of people in the book that he enjoyed their interaction, which were the young kids, the nuns, you know, anybody he deems as like a good person or a pure person, I would say.
Yes, I agree with that.
And just to continue from this scene, he steps out with Sally and they're having a cigarette, and then that's when Sally spots someone she thinks she knows. So we go to the next page, and he says, old Sally kept saying, I know that boy from somewhere. She always knew somebody, any place you took her, or thought she did. She kept saying that till I got bored as hell, and I said to her, why don't you go on over and give him a big soul kiss if you know him? He'll enjoy it. She got sore when I said that. Finally, though, the jerk noticed her and came over and said hello. You should have seen the way they said hello. You thought they hadn't seen each other in 20 years. You thought they'd taken baths in the same bathtub or something when they were little kids. Old Buddy Ruse. It was nauseating. The funny part was, They probably met each other just once at some phony party. Finally, when they were all done slobbering around, old Sally introduced us. His name was George something. I don't even remember. And he went to Andover. Big deal. You should have seen him when old Sally asked him how he liked the play. He was the kind of phony that have to give themselves room when they answer somebody's question. He stepped back and stepped right on the lady's foot behind him. He probably broke every toe in her body. He said the play itself was no masterpiece, but the Lunts, of course, were absolute angels. And then to continue on the next page, angels, for Christ's sake, angels, that killed me. Then he and old Sally started talking about a lot of people they both knew. It was the phoniest conversation you ever heard in your life. They both kept thinking of places as fast as they could. Then they'd think of somebody that lived there and mention their name. I was all set to puke when it was time to go sit down again. I really was. And then when the next act was over, they continued their goddamn boring conversation. They kept thinking of more places and more names of people that lived there. The worst part was the jerk had one of those very phony Ivy League voices, one of those very tired, snobby voices. He sounded just like a girl. He didn't hesitate to horn in on my date, the bastard. I even thought for a minute that he was going to get in the goddamn cab with us when the show was over because he walked about 2 blocks with us. But he had to meet a bunch of phonies for cocktails, he said. I can see them all sitting around in some bar with their goddamn checkered vests, criticizing shows and books and women in those tired, snobby voices. They kill me, those guys. I sort of hated Sally by the time we got in the cab, after listening to that phony Andover bastard for about 10 hours. Listen, this is where I understand him because I have met people like that. So there's a balance to it, you know. We do have to question his perception, right? Because we know he's not a reliable narrator. But have we all met snobby individuals who pretend like they've known each other for years, but they just like see each other once in a blue through social settings, and people who exaggerate their connections to others, like how well they know them, and try to portray themselves better than what they are? Yeah, absolutely. What did you think of this scene?
Right, I can see it from both perspectives where you're like, oh my god, like they're just doing the pleasantries, and I'm someone who's very much doesn't like that either. Like Derry and I both like, we don't want small talk and we don't want to be fake. But then at the same time, where I mentioned earlier, he's an unreliable narrator, where I'm like, what if they actually were good friends or did know each other? Or like, what if he had run into Jane Gallagher? Wouldn't he have had like the same kind of experience that Sally was having in that moment? Where I feel like a part of it is true. It's like he's annoyed by this guy kind of taking over his date and like walking with them and talking with them, and he kind of just wants this guy to leave. But then at the same time, I'm like, I see why he's annoyed, but then I get that he's a pessimistic person, and I think because I'm trying to be less pessimistic in life, I was getting very much annoyed by him, but then I do see myself in it. But then I'm getting annoyed with myself where I'm like, okay, but maybe just enjoy the moment or like enjoy something. And we see that later on too when he has a conversation with his little sister Phoebe. And she's like, you don't like anything. You don't like anything. And she kind of calls him out on his behavior. And that's how I was feeling throughout the book, where I'm like, okay, again, here's another thing that you don't like or you're annoyed about. So again, I see both sides of the situation.
But do we think that he's also pessimistic, or do we feel like maybe he's feeling left out in certain moments? So when he does feel left out, he starts to... This is where we see his immaturity, right? Like maybe he's feeling left out, so he wants to shit on the people he's around because he doesn't feel included. And he's
Exactly.
right. This is where he does alienate himself purposefully, but then do we think he alienates himself because he's feeling uncomfortable in certain social settings and he isn't making an effort to be a part of the group? So in that case, he's like, I'm going to fully embrace my rebellious, I'm not like anybody else attitude because that feels more comforting than to actually make an effort to be a part of the group.
Of course.
And I get that. Like I've been in social settings where I'm like, okay, everyone knows each other and it's feeling cliquey, and then you become negative and you're like, well, I'm just going to criticize the people and think that they're being phony and fake rather than feeling like, okay, I can be a part of the fun and I can enjoy the conversation with them.
Right, and that becomes kind of his defense mechanism throughout the book where he's just cutting to like everything's phony. And certainly there are a lot of things in life where you're like, this is fake, this is not a real conversation, but but he takes it to extreme where now he hates everyone. Where at the end of it, he's like, by the time we got into the cab, I hated her for having a conversation.
Right, exactly. But it's because he was feeling left out and feeling inferior, right, to this gentleman that Sally knew. So he's like, to make myself feel better, I'm going to put these people down. And we do see that he, like you mentioned earlier, he is a hypocrite because he's also a liar and he could be phony. He's over here telling Sally, oh, I love you. And then later on, we see him asking her to run away with him, and they can go live in a cabin and he'll get a job and he'll do all these things. I think that's when his mania comes out.
Right.
And we even see that they made plans for him to go to her house for Christmas Eve for him to trim her Christmas tree, right? And we see Sally asking him repeatedly, like, are you going to follow through on your plans? Because she knows that he can be flaky. I'm sure she's recognized that he's not being true to his word. Sorry, I'm just going to the part where he's telling her that he wants to run away with her. Well, he also tells her that she is getting on his nerves, right?
Yes, he tells her she's a pain in the ass.
Yes, yes.
He tells her she's a pain in the ass. And you know what? If a man said that to me on a date, I would be leaving.
Exactly. So there's a part I didn't want to read because I feel like this sheds more light into his fears and his worry about growing up and becoming an adult and having to take on responsibilities that he may not be ready for. So on my page it's 144, but your page it might be like 128, 129.
What sentence are you starting with?
So I'm starting with, it's at the bottom of my page and it says, do you ever get fed up? I mean, do you ever get scared that everything was going to go lousy?
Okay, that's in the middle of page 130 for me. So we have different copies, so our pages are not lining up. So sorry if you are watching and trying to read along and your pages aren't lining up.
So there's a part where Holden is talking to Sally and he asks her, do you ever get fed up? I said, I mean, do you ever get scared that everything was going to go lousy unless you did something? I mean, do you like school and all that stuff? It's a terrific bore. I mean, do you hate it? I mean, it's a terrific bore, but do you hate it is what I mean. And Sally says, well, I don't hate it. You always have to. Well, I hate it. Boy, do I hate it, I said. But it isn't just that. It's everything. I hate living in New York and all. Taxi cabs and Madison Avenue buses with the drivers and all always yelling at you. And get out at the rear door and being introduced to phony guys that call the lunch angels and going up and down in elevators when you just want to go outside And guys fitting your pants all the time at Brooks, and people always, "Don't shout, please," old Sally said, which was very funny because I wasn't even shouting. "Take cars," I said. I said it in this very quiet voice. "Take most people. They're crazy about cars. They worry if they get a little scratch on them, and they're always talking about how many miles they get to a gallon. And if they get a brand new car already, they start thinking about trading it in for ones that's even newer. I don't even like old cars. I mean, they don't even interest me. I'd rather have a goddamn horse. A horse is at least human. For God's sakes, a horse you can at least..." "I don't know what you're even talking about," old Sally said. "You jump from one..." "You know something?" I said. "You're probably the only reason I'm in New York right now, or anywhere. If you weren't around, I'd probably be someplace way the hell off, in the woods or some goddamn place. You're the only reason I'm around, practically." "You're sweet," she said, but you can tell she wanted me to change the damn subject. "You ought to go to a boys' school sometime. Try it sometime," I said. "It's full of phonies, and all you do is study so that you can learn enough to be smart enough to be able to buy a goddamn Cadillac someday. And you have to keep making believe you give a damn if the football team loses, and all you do is talk about girls and liquor and sex all day, and everybody sticks together in these dirty little goddamn cliques. The guys that are on the basketball team stick together, the Catholics stick together, the goddamn intellectuals stick together, the guys that play bridge stick together, even the guys that belong to the goddamn Book of the Month club stick together. If you try to have a little intelligence..." "Now listen," old Sally said. "Lots of boys get more out of school than that." I agree they do, some of them. But that's all I get out of it. See, that's my point. That's exactly my goddamn point," I said. "I don't get hardly anything out of anything. I'm in bad shape. I'm in lousy shape." Whew. See, this is where I feel like I understand where he's coming from. The superficial...
This is definitely a manic episode here.
Absolutely. Where he's sick of the superficiality, and like you said, he is searching for meaning, and he wants to figure out what the importance of going to school is, and what the importance of life really is, and what his purpose is, and all the things we all hate too. Like, we hate when people are cliquey, and maybe he doesn't feel like he fits in any group, and then that's where he does feel like an outsider, and then the more he feels like an outsider, the more he wants to isolate himself because he doesn't know how to get inside any of the groups. So then he starts criticizing these people because he doesn't feel like he fits in with any of them.
Right. But he's kind of just like dumping all of this on this poor girl in the cab, and she's telling, and this happens throughout the book where people are like, "Stop yelling," and he's like, "I'm not even yelling." So again, the unreliable narrator, where it's like, here's this, you're in a cab with this guy and he's yelling to you about how much he hates everything in life, and you're just like, what? I don't know what to do. I can't help you. Like, I understand where he's coming from, but then I'm also just viewing it from the other person's perspective as well, where it's like,
No, of course. But just to continue from that part, he says, "Look," I said, "here's my idea. How would you like to get the hell out of here? Here's my idea. I know this guy down in Greenwich Village that we can borrow his car for a couple weeks. He used to go to the same school I did, and he still owes me $10. What we could do is tomorrow morning we could drive up to Massachusetts and Vermont and all around there. See? It's beautiful as hell up there. It really is." I was getting excited as hell the more I thought about it. And I sort of reached over and took old Sally's goddamn hand. What a goddamn fool I was. "No kidding," I said. "I have about $180 in the bank. I can take it out when it opens in the morning. Then I could go down and get this guy's car. No kidding. We'll stay there. We'll stay in these cabin camps and stuff like that till the dough runs out. Then when the dough runs out, I could get a job somewhere, and we could live somewhere with the brook and all, and later on we could get married or something. I could chop all our own wood in the wintertime and all. Honest to God, we could have a terrific time. What do you say? Come on, what do you say? Will you do it with me, please?" And Sally says, "You can't just do something like that." She sounded sore as hell. "Why not? Why the hell not?" Stop screaming at me, please, she said, which was crap because I wasn't even screaming at her. Why can't you? Why not? Because you can't, that's all. In the first place, we're both practically children. And did you ever stop to think what'd you do if you didn't get a job when your money ran out? We'd starve to death. The whole thing's so fantastic, it isn't fantastic. I'd get a job. Don't worry about, sorry. It isn't fantastic. I'd get a job. Don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. What's the matter? Don't you want to go with me? Say so if you don't. And we do see some more mania in this scene. But haven't we all been there where we're like, let's just run away from our problems, and if we go to a cabin in the woods, we can just run away from it all.
Right. I get wanting to run away from it all, but he's trying to pull poor Sally into this. And then when she's not on board, by the end of the conversation, he's saying you could see there wasn't any sense trying to have an intelligent conversation. And I'm just like, you're talking about running away, and
And she's asking logical questions like, well, what if you don't get a job? And like, we're still young, like we're practically children.
right, she's
And
being
he doesn't want to
reasonable.
hear it. Like, he doesn't want to hear practical questions. And then, you know what? This is where he is an asshole because he ends up leaving her at the skating rink.
Yeah, because he thinks like she doesn't understand him. That's this whole book. No one understands him. He's so tortured and lonely, and no one understands him. But I don't think he's ever trying to understand anyone else that he's having these conversations with.
Exactly. Nor does he actually want to be a responsible person.
Yeah.
He wants, listen, I get it. The dreamer mentality. Some of us are dreamers and some of us aren't. And I'm speaking to our dreamers right now. I get it. I get it. You want to have these fantastical ideas and be anti-system, and who cares about school and what does it really do for you, and we're gonna be all right if we stick together and we will run away and everything will work out. And we know if he ran away with old Sally Hayes, he'd be annoyed with her by the time they drove an hour into their journey, right?
Right, and also this whole weekend he spends his money on alcohol, cigarettes. He buys the prostitute at one point. He does give money to the nuns. He's a charitable man. But he blows through his money in a weekend, and even mentions like, now I have nothing left. So he's over here talking about like, I'm gonna run away, when he can't even spend his money correctly. Again, the no sense of what being an adult actually is. And again, he comes from privilege, so it's like, would you be able to take care of yourself? Like, I think if he did try to execute any of these plans of like going to the ranch in Colorado or going to Vermont with Sally, like it would never actually turn into anything, or reality would hit him in the face, because then he'd realize all the responsibilities he'd actually have to carry out. I don't think he has any concept of that yet.
I agree. I do agree with that, which is why, he does have teachers that see potential in him, but they're like, well, what are you going to do? And I do want to talk about the teacher towards the end, Mr. Antolini. What did you think about that scene? I almost forgot about that scene. But he does allude to it seems like he's had similar experiences in the past where something inappropriate happened to him. So, digging more into the trauma of why he is the way he is. This is towards the end of the book, while Mel finds that page where Holden, he's been out for the past 2 nights essentially, and he finally wants to go back home to see his younger sister Phoebe, which he does, and we'll bring up that part in just a moment as well, because that is a significant part to the book. But he has to get out of the house because his parents got home, and he calls up one of his old teachers, Mr. Antolini, who invites him to stay there. And then we see Mr. Antolini having a conversation with him and is basically trying to lecture him about his life and get a better understanding of what he's going to do with his life.
There was also Mr. Spencer in the beginning trying to talk some sense into him as well. So it does seem like there are adults in his life who are like, like, what's the matter with you?
Right. But unfortunately, it seems like Mr. Antolini doesn't actually have his best interest compared to Mr. Spencer, because we see this weird moment where Holden finally falls asleep at Mr. Antolini's house, and he wakes up to Mr. Antolini touching his head, petting his head. So in my book, it's page 211.
Mine's on 192.
So Holden says, I woke up all of a sudden. I don't know what time it was or anything, but I woke up. I felt something on my head, some guy's hand. Boy, it really scared the hell out of me. What it was Mr. Antolini's hand. What he was doing was he was sitting on the floor next to the couch in the dark and all, and he was sort of petting me or patting me on the goddamn head. Boy, I'll bet I jumped about 1,000 feet. What the hell you doing? I said. Nothing. I'm simply sitting here admiring. What are you doing anyway? I said over again. I didn't know what the hell to say. I mean, I was embarrassed as hell. How about keeping your voice down? I'm sitting here. I have to go anyway, I said. Boy, was I nervous. I started putting on my damn pants in the dark. I could hardly get them on. I was so damn nervous. I know more damn perverts at schools and all than anybody you ever met. And they're always being perverty when I'm around. You have to go where? Mr. Antolini said. He was trying to act very goddamn casual and cool and all, but he wasn't any too goddamn cool. Take my word. I left my bags and all at the station. I think maybe I'd better go down and get them. I have all my stuff in them. They'll be there in the morning. Now go back to bed. I'm going to bed myself. What's the matter with you? Nothing's the matter. It's just that all my money and stuff's in one of my bags. I'll be right back. I'll get a cab and be right back, I said. Boy, I was falling all over myself in the dark. The thing is, it isn't mine, the money. It's my mother's, and I... Don't be ridiculous, Holden. Get back in that bed. I'm going to bed myself. The money will be there safe and sound in the morning. No kidding. I gotta get going. I really do. I was damn near all dressed already, except that I couldn't find my tie. I couldn't remember where I put my tie. I put on my jacket and all without it. Old Mr. Antolini was sitting now in the big chair a little ways away from me, watching me. It was dark and all, and I couldn't see him so hot, but I knew he was watching me all right. He was still boozing too. I could see his trusty highball glass in his hand. You're a very, very strange boy. I know it, I said. I didn't even look around much for my tie, so I went without it. Goodbye, sir, I said. Thanks a lot, no kidding.
But what we see throughout the book is he doesn't really seem to like affection either way. Obviously, this is creepy. It's the middle of the night. The guy's sitting in the dark, stroking his hair. So it 100% is creepy. But at the same time, like, even if he were to be doing it in, like, I don't even know. I'm not trying to justify any of it, but I'm just saying, I feel like even if he were doing it in just like a loving way or caring way, I don't think Holden would have responded well to it either way, because even in the earlier scenes, he gets the prostitute and she sits on his lap and he's so annoyed that she's sitting on his lap. Right. And then
which
later on,
could very well, allude to some sort of sexual trauma throughout his life, which is why
Right.
he is uncomfortable with affection or with even losing his virginity.
Exactly. And then he even mentions when he does go to see his sister Phoebe, he's like, she's too affectionate. Like, because she wants to give him a hug and she's happy to see him. And he's kind of weirded out by that as well. So it does seem like you said, he's alluding to some kind of trauma in that sense that we don't fully unpack, where he's saying that this happens to him often. And he seems to have an issue with being intimate.
Right. And I just wanted to point this out because I feel like it could help understand him a little bit better, right? Like, clearly there's more that happened to him than we are fully given information about, which could quite possibly have led to mental health issues, right? So we don't really know. I mean, he hints at certain things, and then we know losing his brother at a young age definitely affected him. So there are definitely important aspects of his life that he does need to heal from. So I do think it lends into it. I do think it lends into some clarity as to why he does act irrationally and he does have manic episodes. And he is looking for an escape, right?
Right.
And we see that once more when he goes to visit Phoebe. He has two encounters with Phoebe where he stops at home before he goes to Mr. Antolini's, and then after the incident at Mr. Antolini's, he goes back into his manic episode where he wants to run away again. And we see him deciding to go west, right? Where he's like, I'm going to write a note to Phoebe so she can meet me at school tomorrow during lunch. I'll give her back her money, and then he wants to run away.
Mhm.
And I wanted to bring up the part where he goes to her school and we see, oh, you know what? Let me backtrack a little bit because we have to mention the part where the title of the book is referenced.
Yes. And I was rereading that part because I was like, okay, we're at this is the not it's not the bulk of the book because it's such a small paragraph, but it's again, yeah, like you're saying, it's the title of the book and the essence of the book. And I was rereading it and I just felt like it wasn't as profound as I once thought it was, which I think I'm realizing that throughout rereading this entire book.
Right. Listen, what I fully gathered is that you have a young teenager who is lost in life. Sure, he has his trauma, but he does come from privilege and wealth, and he's given the opportunities to go to really great schools and has the ability to be really set up for success, right? But it's clear that this isn't working for him, right? And there's something within him that is immature, right, to a fault, but I think he also wants to retain this innocence where he wants to live a more carefree life, but he knows he's getting older and that's not going to be a possibility anymore. Which is when we see him tell Phoebe, right? Because I would see her as his anchor in a way, right? Like, she's beyond her years and she's very intelligent. No, go ahead.
I feel like she's another reasonable person, but he listens to her more than he would anyone else, even though he does interrupt her quite a lot as well. But she's another person who's like, okay, but what do you want to do with your life? Which I feel like he gets asked in different ways throughout the book, where people are trying to figure out, they're trying to figure out Holden. They're trying to understand him. He's not letting anyone in. He definitely has his guard up.
Right, and they do know he has potential and they want to get him on the right path. And it's like the more he has the guidance, the more he wants to rebel against that because he's like, I'll figure it out. And I can relate to that. It'll happen. It'll all work itself out. So let's go to that page. Let's go to that.
I think you have a lot more going for you than Holden Caulfield.
Yes. And granted, we did not grow up rich, so he has that over me. And one thing I wanted to point out about him is that he despises people, right? But he actually has so many people he can call up and hang out with. And I'm like, okay, you're not as lonely as you think you are. Like, you have people you can hang out with, and if you actually valued friendships, then you can see the positive in these connections.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. There's so much in the book that he's complaining about, where he's like mad if they won't give him a drink, and it's like, well, you're 17. Maybe it's for the best that you don't get a drink. But then there's also so many times where he walks into places and he does get a drink. So I don't know. It's just funny to me, like the things he'll get upset about or mad about. Like I said, even that whole incident with Sally where she's just having a conversation with another person, and there's a part of him that's maybe envious that he's not able to just be as carefree and just like live in the moment, which I totally relate to. I think that's why I was getting annoyed by him too. Like I can relate to what he's saying, but then I'm also getting annoyed with him and myself, where I'm like, okay, but be the change you want to see.
Yes. No, I fully see myself in him too, where I'm like, you do this as well, Danielle. You nitpick and criticize and find the faults in every star.
Stop, not. Which I want to get into. It's funny you mentioned John Green, because I do want to talk about, well, let's finish this part, and then I do want to talk about when he mentions books.
Listen, I only say that because someone in my building had left a box of books, and A Fault in Our Stars was in the box, so I picked it up and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I do want to cry. I'm gonna read this again.
Oh my god. I think I saw that I should go back and see if it's still there, because I think I literally just saw that in one of those little libraries.
Yes, maybe we'll add it to next year's book club. But let's go to where he's talking to Phoebe. And for me, this is page 189. Are you there?
Are you there, God? It's me. I'm on page 169.
Okay. You don't like anything that's happening. It made me even more depressed when she said that. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Sure, I do. Don't say that. Why the hell do you say that? Because you don't. You don't like any schools. You don't like a million things. You don't. I do. That's where you're wrong. That's exactly where you're wrong. Why the hell do you have to say that? I said. Boy, was she depressing me. Because you don't, she said. Name one thing. One thing? One thing I like? I said. Okay. The trouble was I couldn't concentrate too hot. Sometimes it's hard to concentrate. One thing I like a lot, you mean? I asked her. She didn't answer me, though. She was in a cockeyed position way the hell over the other side of the bed. She was about 1,000 miles away. Come on, answer me, I said. One thing I like a lot, or one thing I just like? You like a lot. All right, I said, but the trouble was I couldn't concentrate. About all I could think of were two nuns that went around collecting dough in those beat-up old straw baskets, especially the one with the glasses with those iron rims. I'm going to skip this part where he talks about James Castle.
it's interesting that she's asking him name one thing he likes, and his mind goes to this boy who committed suicide. And again, I think that shows where he is struggling with depression.
And his ADHD, man, like his mind.
Yeah, a lot of mental illness is what we're seeing.
All over the place. But isn't that us where we're like, oh, we're going to tell you about one subject, but then we're going to incorporate about 60 other before we finish.
I wonder if a psychiatrist has, I'm sure they have, but like psychoanalyzed Holden Caulfield. Like, I would love to see that.
All right, so should I continue where he's going to get up to the part about the Catcher in the Rye? So after he mentions James Castle, the young kid that commits suicide, he tells Phoebe that he likes Allie, his brother that passed. He says, and I like doing what I'm doing right now, sitting here with you and talking and thinking about stuff. And Allie's dead. You always say that. If somebody's dead and everything and in heaven, then it isn't really... I know he's dead. Don't you think I know that? I can still like him though, can I? Just because somebody's dead, you don't just stop liking them. For God's sake. Especially if they were about 1,000 times nicer than the people you know that are alive and all. Anyway, I like it now, I said. I mean right now, sitting here with you and just chewing the fat and horsing. This isn't anything really. It is something really. Certainly it is. Why the hell isn't it? People never think anything is anything, really. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. Stop swearing, all right? Name something else. Name something you'd like to be, like a scientist or a lawyer or something. I couldn't be a scientist. I'm no good in science. Well, a lawyer, like Daddy and all. Lawyers are all right, I guess, but it doesn't appeal to me, I said. I mean, they're all right if they go around saving innocent guys' lives all the time and like that, but you don't do that kind of stuff if you're a lawyer. All you do is make a lot of dough and play golf and play bridge and buy cars and drink martinis and look like a hot shot. And besides, even if you did go around saving guys' lives and all, how would you know if you did it because you really wanted to save guys' lives? Or because you did it because what you really wanted to do was be a terrific lawyer, with everybody slapping you on the back and congratulating you in court when the goddamn trial was over. The reporters and everybody, the way it is in the dirty movies. How would you know you weren't being a phony? The trouble is you wouldn't. And then as he continues on, he tells Phoebe, you know what I'd like to be? I mean, if I had my goddamn choice. What? Stop swearing. You know that song, If a Body Catch a Body Coming Through the Rye? It's If a Body Meet a Body Coming Through the Rye, old Phoebe said. It's a poem by Robert Burns. I know it's a poem by Robert Burns. She was right, though. It is If a Body Meet a Body Coming Through the Rye. I didn't know it then, though. I thought it was If a Body Catch a Body, I said. Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around. Nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going. I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye and all. I know it's crazy, but that's the only thing I'd really like to be. I know it's crazy. What did you think about that part after rereading it after so many years? I know you were saying it didn't feel as profound as you thought it was. Do we think that there's a part of him that wish he could have saved his brother? Or maybe even if he did experience traumatic events in his life, no one was there to save him in that moment. So one thing he could think of is being the person to help save children.
And going back to what I was saying before, how it was weird how he went to thinking about that boy who killed himself, and it's like maybe he wished he could have saved him also, right? Like there's a savior complex within him. And again, going back to me being like, well, what did we study in school about this book? I do remember studying this part in depth and kind of pulling it apart and being like, well, he wants to save the children, and maybe he wants to save them from adulthood, and maybe he wants to save their innocence. Again,
Right.
we're all just alluding to what we think Holden is saying in this moment. But as you're reading the book and he goes on all these manic rants, you're like, what is this dude? What does this dude want out of life, right? Because he also talks about running away with Sally. He also talks about going to Colorado and living on the ranch, and he's kind of just making things up as he goes. And then he's basing this off of mishearing what the words are and saying, okay, well, this is what I want to be. And again, we can make it profound and being like, he just wants to save the children. And I get that completely.
Right, but it's not a real, it's nothing of substance that he's actually
Okay.
saying.
What did you think rereading this part?
I do agree. I don't think it came off as profound as it may have once been perceived in the past. And it could just be him rambling like he does, right? He heard the kids singing the song on the street, and then his mind probably spiraled like it does, and he's like, oh yeah, like imagine these kids like running off a cliff, like I could save them. And that's not an actual career or an actual job, and it's just a fantasy that he's creating in order to make himself feel better.
Right, because he also goes back to, going back to where he's saying he couldn't be a lawyer because he wanted to know if he was actually saving someone's life.
Right, and going back to his idea of like the adult world and it all just being phony, and there's not actually real heroes in our everyday life. In his opinion. And I do think views he is talking about the lawyers, and he just views them as like, oh, they just play golf and bridge all day. And this is where I understand him when he's viewing like the elites in a certain lens, and he's like, well, they don't really make an impact on life, like they're just playing golf and playing bridge and not really contributing to the world.
Right, again, he grew up in this privileged life, so he's been around all these people who he perceives just care about money and fame and getting the slap on the back and getting congratulated, which, yeah, I completely understand that as well. But then it also comes to, okay, well, what are you going to do to contribute to society? Because I think there are a lot of paths he could go down where he's actually helping and saving people.
Right, and we see he knows what he doesn't want to be, but he doesn't know what he wants to be.
Which, again, is a very normal thing to experience. I guess it just wasn't ever stated in the 1950s.
Right. I mean, he is calling out Hollywood, and he's calling out the rich, but not being grateful that he does come from wealth and he is able to just transfer schools and his parents will take care of it. Not fully acknowledging his privilege and being grateful for the opportunities he is awarded for being from a wealthy family. So just to move forward, we do see I'm just thinking about it more. I guess maybe he is Dan Humphrey. He's just like this sad boy, like in this elite world, feeling like an outsider. And he's the writer that's like, no one understands me. And look at these wealthy people that just act all
Right.
snobby and phony, and they don't do anything to help the world or save the children. So I wanted to go. Did you want to backtrack to that point you made earlier?
About the books. I want to
Yeah.
talk about that really quickly because he brings up two books that I think are still classics. And I don't know if this is J.D. Salinger being sore in his real life about the success of other authors. But this is on page 141 for me. He brings up his brother. His brother went into the army and is now a famous writer in Hollywood. And he says, what gets me about DB though, he hated the war so much, and yet he got me to read this book, A Farewell to Arms, last summer. He said it was so terrific. That's what I can't understand. It had this guy in it named Lieutenant Henry that was supposed to be a nice guy and all. I don't see how DB could hate the army and war and all so much and still like a phony like that. I mean, for instance, I don't see how he could like a phony book like that and still like that one by Ring Lardner or that other one he's so crazy about, The Great Gatsby. DB got sore when I said that, and I said, sorry. DB got sore when I said that and said I was too young and all to appreciate it. But I don't think so. I told him I liked Ring Lardner and The Great Gatsby and all. I did too. I was crazy about The Great Gatsby. Old Gatsby, old sport. That killed me. Anyway, I'm sort of glad they've got the atomic bomb invented. If there is ever another war, I'm gonna sit right the hell on top of it. I'll volunteer for it. I swear to God I will.
I marked that part too.
But first of all, I just wanted to bring up A Farewell to Arms. I enjoyed reading that book, and that one is by Hemingway.
Yes, that is Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, so A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. And I love that book, and I actually wanted to bring that book up a few times. And in that book, the main protagonist is struggling with his beliefs. And I mentioned too how like religion has been mentioned in every book we read, and something that's always stuck with me after reading A Farewell to Arms is here's this guy who doesn't believe in God. Spoiler alert for this book, by the way, for A Farewell to Arms. He doesn't believe in God, and then his pregnant wife is in the hospital, and then he gets to this moment where he's praying and he's praying and he's praying. And I really enjoyed that book, and I think it's a great book, and maybe we'll revisit it in the future. So I don't understand why Salinger and Holden Caulfield are shitting on Hemingway in this. And then he's like, oh, if you don't like war, how could you like this book? But as someone who doesn't support war, I still thought that was a great read. And then also The Great Gatsby, I still think is a great book. And again, showing maybe his immaturity too, where his brother's like, well, you just don't appreciate it yet. So I don't know. I don't agree with his takes on these two books, even though he doesn't really say much about The Great Gatsby. But it's just interesting to me that these novels were mentioned.
Well, he also mentions earlier when he's talking to the nuns about Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare.
Another, I would say, classic. I think these are all classics that till this day are still talked about and still brought up, and I think Salinger wanted to recreate that in his own sense.
Right, and like I mentioned earlier, through Caulfield's viewpoint, he's never fully satisfied, right? Even when he thinks something's good, he's always going to find something to criticize about it.
Right, and I think that this character can relate to a lot of the characters mentioned. Have you read A Farewell to Arms?
I have, yes.
And it's interesting because even there's a part in this book where Holden's saying he's an atheist and he doesn't believe in God. And I was like, you would think he would have related to that aspect of that book. You get what I'm saying? Or even like in The Great Gatsby, how Gatsby's kind of a loner and by himself and just partying all the time. Where I'm like, again, he mentions books where you would think that J.D. Salinger was inspired by those books, writing the character of Holden Caulfield.
Which I'm sure he was.
So did he add this into his book for shock value to be like, I'm gonna mention these books?
Well, maybe it is about, because he's creating a character, right, Holden Caulfield, who is anti-system, anti-Hollywood, anti-movies. So I think anything that's popular, I would have to do my research on how popular A Farewell to Arms was during this time and The Great Gatsby, but I feel like he's going to be the type of person that is critical of anything that is well received by the public.
Well, at this time, writers, which his brother is one, were considered celebrities. Like Fitzgerald and Hemingway were very much celebrities of their time.
Right.
So again, I think it is Salinger's own thoughts projecting through the book, and I think you said that earlier.
Yes, a self-insert. Most authors are.
Yes, and I think him, and not even mentioning Hemingway and Fitzgerald, but just like by name, but mentioning the name of the books. Right. Very intentional, I would say.
Of course. Ironically, he loves that Gatsby uses Old Sport, and then we see that's one of the traits he picked up when he talks about people, like calling them Old Jane and Old Stratlater and Old Phoebe.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's definitely inspired by those books.
But not going to admit it because he wants to be anti-system, anti-pop culture, anti-Hollywood, anti-movies.
Right, anti-religion, which, okay, going back to that point that I was bringing up in A Farewell to Arms, because I feel like we see this theme brought up in so many books we've read, where all of these protagonists are struggling with their belief and mentioning that maybe they don't really believe in anything, but there's always a part of the book where religion, there's always a part of, not every single book, but a lot of books where religion is brought up. Have you noticed that?
Of course. I mean, religion is a big impact on the world as a whole, right? Whether you believe in it or you don't. And that ties back into the age-old question of, well, where did we come from and what are we and what's our purpose? It's only natural for people to incorporate that into a story because I think so many of us are constantly questioning. We're constantly trying to find our own beliefs.
Right, and there's even a part where he gets into bed and then he's like, he feels like praying, but then decides not to. I like that he brought up A Farewell to Arms because I've been meaning to bring it up in our book reviews because I really enjoyed that book, and I think that is a theme that is shown in so many books we've read already, where the main character is struggling through life and with trauma and kind of debating if they believe in a higher power or not. And even the part where he's talking to the nuns and he feels the need to give them money and is trying to show them what a good person he is, and he even wants to pay for their lunch, and he's feeling sorry for them and the life that they're leading.
Right. I also wanted to point out the part where he's at the Christmas show at Radio City, and he says, all these angels start coming out of the boxes and everywhere, guys carrying crucifixes and stuff all over the place, and the whole bunch of them, thousands of them, singing "Come all ye faithful" like mad. Big deal. It's supposed to be religious as hell, I know, and very pretty and all, but I can't stand anything religious or pretty, for God's sakes, about a bunch of actors carrying crucifixes all over the stage. When they were all finished and started going out the boxes again, you could tell they could hardly wait to get a cigarette or something. I saw it with old Sally Hayes the year before, and she kept saying how beautiful it was, the costumes and all. I said old Jesus probably would have puked if he could see it. All those fancy costumes and all. Sally said I was sacrilegious atheist. I probably am. I think Jesus really would have liked, sorry. The thing Jesus really would have liked would be the guy that plays the kettle drums in the orchestra. I watched that guy since I was about 8 years old. My brother Ali and I, if we were with our parents and all, we used to move our seats and go way down so we could watch him. He's the best drummer I ever saw. He only gets a chance to bang them a couple times during a whole piece, but he never looks bored when he isn't doing it. Then when he does bang them, he does it so nice and sweet, with this nervous expression on his face. One time when we went to Washington with my father, Ali sent him a postcard, but I'll bet he never got it. We weren't too sure how to address it. After the Christmas thing was over, the goddamn picture started. It was so putrid, I couldn't take my eyes off it. And then he goes into a movie he watched, and then he's interested by it, but he finds everything about it that he hates. So I just think it's interesting that he he mentions that Jesus would have puked. And this is where I do laugh at his takes, because there's so much of what humans do that tarnish the meaning of things, and how we've commercialized Jesus, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. But I think he notices where people lose the essence and meanings of the purpose of religion, right? For example, and then that's where he feels like it's the fakeness comes in, where you're like, okay, do you even follow the values of Jesus? Like, are we losing his meaning and his message of what he stood for, right? As he's watching this Christmas radio show.
Right, and I agree with that as well. I often think about that too. Like, if Jesus were to see what we've done with his image and all of that, and even not too long ago, Trump made himself Jesus, and yeah, we've definitely tarnished his name, and there are definitely people out there who, like Holden says, are phonies. I just think it's interesting that the theme of religion is gonna always show up.
Of course, and like you mentioned, him trying to appear like a good person to the nun, right? And I think that's another reason why so many people incorporate religion into their story, because it's not only questioning their purpose or their relationship to religion, but also, I would say, have humans lost the meaning of what religion is centered around, right? Or how some people weaponize religion.
Of course, and it's funny because also while reading this book, and I am shitting on it quite a lot, where I'm rereading it and I'm like, okay, this doesn't hold up to what it was, and here's this book about a guy who thinks very highly of himself, and then this book is passed on for generations, and I'm like, well, a huge similarity between that and the Bible as well, right? Where we kind of have this, like, we put someone on a pedestal of like, wow, look how profound this young man is and all he has to offer and say. And then you're really looking through it and you're like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, his takes, I think, again, were maybe shocking for the time, where he's expressing his feelings, and that's not always, especially for a man, that's not always welcomed. But then you're rereading this in 2026 and you're like, yeah, we all can feel this way. And I think social media has helped us realize that we're not too different, right? Again, at this time, this book being published probably meant a lot to a lot of people. But I think we're growing up in a time where we're so freely allowed to express ourselves, and we can get online and be like, well, this person's fake and I hate this and I didn't like this movie. And more people are moving away from putting up this facade and being more honest about not liking those things. So I can see how this book could be like a catalyst for like letting people speak more freely and call out the phoniness of the world. But I just feel like it's not
And we do see where it's outdated.
right. Again, outdated. That's the word I'm looking for. It's outdated, obviously, and not even in a bad sense. Like, I don't really feel like there was anything in this book that I'm like, oh, this is so fucking offensive.
I do think there is parts where it's his whiteness is coming through.
Well, yeah, there's definitely sexism in there too, as well. But I was gonna say, I feel like there are a lot of takes in here that aren't outdated. Like you're saying, where you're like, I relate to that, and I definitely relate to certain parts too. I just don't think it's as shocking. Like I think when this book was published, it was shocking for someone to come out and say these things. I guess there is a part of me that's also slightly offended. Like I just said, I was annoyed that he called out these books that I still think are great, not a real person, but I do think it's Salinger's own opinions protruding through.
Absolutely. I do think there are elements where it's outdated, like we mentioned.
Right. But it's sadly it's not though, because that still exists.
Right. Right.
Like if a white man wrote a book today, would there be a lot of similarities? I feel like there would be. And that's where again I mentioned too, where he's like putting down certain people and especially women, where he's like, and then there were the two ugly ones when he meets the three older women at the bar. That part also really bothered me. But I don't know if he was intentionally written to be an annoying character. That's where I kind of struggle with, like, is this a classic and this is a profound man who's like revealing information that we didn't know? No, I don't think so. I think he does have relatable takes, but I think overall he's very annoying. And it's interesting because you brought up a while ago how, I think this was when we were talking about the animated shorts, how people don't want the character to be unlikable. Do you remember saying this?
Yes.
I don't necessarily agree with that because I feel like most main characters are annoying. And I rewatch a lot of TV shows or reread books and I'm like, this person kind of sucks. So it's interesting that like people feel like, oh, it needs to be a likable character. But I think most of the time, a lot of main characters aren't the most likable person in the story.
Well, ironically, that ties into Holden's disdain for one's egotistical individual mindset, but he exemplifies that just the same.
Right, and I would just be interesting to know if Salinger knew what he was doing, or do you think that he thought he was providing something new to the world? And he was in a sense, but overall, not really.
I guess we'll see what the documentary shares and what insight we can gain from that. And going back to my point earlier, this is why I thought about George Carlin, because most of his stand-up is like, the world is shitty, people suck. And again, he's just another white man getting on the stage bitching about all the ways humans are annoying.
Right, and there's just so much irony within that where it's like, well, this world was made for you and you still hate it, so maybe understand where other people are coming from. Or even just understanding why some people feel the need to just go along with it because they're just trying to get through life. And I think that's something that I'm realizing more and more the older I get, where I'm like, okay, I can sit here with the cloud over my head and be cynical about everything, or I can actually go out and enjoy the moments that I'm having and understand that maybe not everyone is gonna see things from my perspective. And have the same takes that I have in life.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Which I would hope by the end of this book, where he's sitting in some kind of facility and he's talking to therapists, that he ends up having the same reflection and turns into an adult who makes something out of all of this angst.
Right. But do we think he does have redeeming qualities? Like when he takes Phoebe to the carousel and he's just enjoying the purity of watching her having a good time on the carousel. And I wanted to read that part as like our wrap up of our review. On my page is 233, where he finally, Phoebe wanted to run away with him. And I do think that shows how much she loves her brother. And of course, she doesn't want to lose another brother because one died and the other one moved to Hollywood.
Yeah, let's get a Phoebe Caulfield narration. Let's hear her story.
Phoebe Weatherfield Caulfield, where he is sitting on the bench watching her ride the carousel, and he tells us, "Boy, it began to rain like a bastard. In buckets, I swear to God. All the parents and mothers and everybody went over and stood right under the roof of the carousel so they wouldn't get soaked to the skin or anything. But I stuck around on the bench for quite a while. I got pretty soaking wet, especially my neck and my pants. My hunting hat really gave me quite a lot of protection, in a way, but I got soaked anyway. I didn't care though. I felt so damn happy all of a sudden. The way old Phoebe kept going around and around. I was damn near bawling. I felt so damn happy, if you want to know the truth. I don't know why. It was just that she looked so damn nice, the way she kept going around and around in her blue coat and all. God, I wish you could have been there." What did you think about that scene before he ends the last chapter with half a page?
Right. We already know through other parts of this book that he has a soft spot for his sister and he has a lot of love for her. Does that mean that he has, does loving your family mean you have redeemable qualities? Like, I don't know. Like, I would hope that it's nice to see that he has love for something, especially his little sister. um,
Well, we also see him helping the young boys at the museum, showing them where the mummies were.
right. That's what I'm saying. I think if he had the right guidance, maybe he'll become a teacher or something to do with helping children. I definitely see that in his future.
But he has a lot of toxicity to heal from.
Yeah, I don't know. I think again, I keep shitting on the book and the character.
Well, like you said, maybe if this was, let's just say this was intentional, right? Like J.D. Salinger wanted to make a more unlikable main character, especially compared to the books he's criticizing, where one can argue you have sympathy for Gatsby and you have sympathy for the main character in A Farewell to Arms, who I'm losing I can't remember his name, right? So he was like, well, let's build a character of a, and it is, it would come across a lot different if Holden Caulfield was an adult, right? Like he purposefully is a young teenager, viewing the world through his lens and understanding why he feels so negative.
Right, which is why I'm more forgiven because of course if this were a 40-year-old man, you'd be like, "All right, buddy, time to get it together." And so I think it is good that it ends with him getting the help that he clearly needs. But again, I was just saying I don't see it as a redeeming quality that he has this love for his sister, right? Like I think it just shows more of a human side to him. And I think it is a beautiful moment that he's sitting there and he's happy and he's finally finding some sort of happiness, because there's also going back to the conversation where his sister's like, all right, name something you like. And he's telling her, well, I like just sitting here talking to you. But even his sister, who's younger than he is like, no, but you need to have some kind of substance in your life, right? Like, it's nice that he's enjoying that moment. Because again, I think a lot of the scenes in this book is him not enjoying the moment. And like you said, finding ways to pick it apart and finding things that are wrong with it. But overall, for his life, what is he gonna do? Right? He can work at the carousel if he wants, but I feel like he's the kind of character who's going to eventually find things to not like about it.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the scene? What were you thinking?
Well, I was going back to me making the movie, and I'm like, okay, great. Like, I can see the scene. um, but I do think it was a beautiful scene, and he needed that moment in the rain to have that reflection. And we did, like you said, this is one of the few moments where we don't see him complaining. And he ultimately does stay in New York City. He stays home, and like you said, hopefully he is getting the help he needs, which is what they do allude to in the last chapter. But the last sentence.
Yes, I literally was gonna bring up the last sentence.
Actually, you know what? We'll read the last couple sentences.
Okay.
He says, about all I know is I sort of miss everybody I told about. Even Stratlater and Ackley, for instance. I think I even miss that goddamn Maurice. It's funny. Don't ever tell anybody anything. If you do, you start missing everybody. Listen, I relate to that where it's like you picked apart all the negative traits of a person and then you don't see them for a long time and then you start remembering actually the redeeming qualities they have. I don't know. He's funny. Like, he even misses Maurice, who beat him. That was the pimp. Like, that was ridiculous. But I just think that just goes to show his mental disorder, right?
Right, and I also think he's starting to have a realization of not living in the moment of a lot of those experiences.
Right. And then especially it's like once you don't have it anymore, you miss it, right? He exemplifies most human traits. Like, you really, like you said, think about like the psychoanalysis of it all.
Right, and again, I still think this is a good book. I think it's still a good book. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's a bad book. I think people should still read it. I just don't think it's maybe as profound as it was once deemed, regarded, right? Like, highly regarded as this amazing coming of age book. But I could see it being a great movie, and I'm going down like the 80s type, 90s type of, you know what I'm saying? Because I also, okay, I said this earlier. I was thinking of Dead Poet Society a lot while reading this because that's also about boys in a prep school and they're going through the teenage angst. And I think I could see them being inspired by Salinger.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure, do they even mention The Catcher in the Rye in that movie? I have to rewatch it. It's been a while.
Maybe we could do an episode on that.
Yes, I know that that's a great movie, but I'll probably end up picking it apart, which is ironic that I'm picking apart Holden Caulfield for picking apart everything.
But we want to hear what you picked apart in this book.
I don't think we need to be studying this in class anymore. I'm going to say that. What do you think? Do you think this needs to be a part of the curriculum?
Seeing how I don't know the current curriculum for English literature, I don't know what they're absorbing these days, so it's hard to form an opinion on that. because they could be reading a lot worse, you know? Not that I think, like you said, I don't think this is like groundbreaking. This is going to help you, you know, view the world in a positive way. Absolutely not. But every book has its purpose, I suppose.
Right. It's still a good read. And I think
And it's an easy read, I would say, too.
and I actually think it's good that we read it right before our next book we're going to read, because I think we're also going to see a stark difference between this book and that one. And are we going to announce it? I know we did a community post, but are we also going to announce it here?
This will be our second memoir. And it is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson.
Hopefully this next book will be regarded in the future as something as great as The Catcher in the Rye. And I feel that way about so many of the other books we've read before too, because like you were saying, there's so much more to take from the other novels we've read. And knowing that a lot of these authors felt like their stories aren't being told. And again, seeing how, because I even brought up Ernest Hemingway and Fitzgerald, who are also white men writing stories about being in somewhat of a privileged lifestyle and traveling around and going to Europe, partying. And not that there's much substance to those stories either, compared to a lot of the stories we've already read. And even The Bluest Eye, that was published in, what was that one, the 70s? There's an author who was trying to get different perspective put out into the world, and there are some people who think it's a great book, but it's again not held as such a high regard as The Catcher in the Rye. So that's why I'm bringing up the comparisons, right? Because it's like, that's why we're rereading the classics, to be like, well, why was this a classic and should it remain that way? Where I feel like there are so many stories that need to be heard and be told and are still fighting to be told. So I'm happy we reread this book.
I think that's all we have for our book review today. Do you agree?
Yes.
Let us know your thoughts if you read Catcher in the Rye. We still want to watch the documentary to get more of an insight on J.D. Salinger. So stay tuned for our book of the month for June. Go get your copy, read with us, join our book club. We're halfway through. We're on our 6th book of the year. And I'm just so proud. We got another one done.
Another one in the books. We're the books. Yes, I'm so happy too. And again, we started this book club because we felt like we haven't been reading as much as we once did. And again, I think what happens is people read a book once and go, yeah, that was a great book, and then they don't revisit it. And then they kind of just take word of mouth of like, this is a great book, this is a great book. So I'm happy that we have a mix of authors in this book club, and we're not just sticking to one genre, and we're not just listening to one person's perspective. So I'm excited for the rest of the year and all the other books that we're going to read.
Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time.
Bye.